Hi, John here from PlanetSafe Lubricants. We're in beautiful Ivins, Utah, and we're outside IBB Cyclery and Multisport. And I'm with Kirk Nelson, the owner. Hi, Kurt.
Hi, John. Good morning.
Thank you for being here with us today. Kurt actually, he's one of my motivators when I'm out riding around here. I did knock him off of one Strava segment, but he made me pay for it, so I'll never do that again. Of course, the tailwind.
Is
40 mile an hour tailwind really helped. We're going to talk about
motorized, I was motor pace, tailwind, behind a semi-truck, yes. And I posted it to Strava.
Yeah, I learned my lesson. So what we're going to talk about is lubing a bike. A lot of people, when they think about lubing a bike, they probably just think about the chain mostly.
That's true. They usually wait until they hear something. They hear squeaky, dry sounding in their drivetrain, or they have problems.
Right.
It's like everything else. They just wait till it's essentially broken until they want to do something about it. But they typically figure it's the chain.
Right. So really what we're going to talk here about is prevention, because some people invest a lot of money in a bike and they don't think about a little bit of lube.
It's really shocking. Just in fact, the last week we had Ironman in town, and I worked on a good number of the pros bikes.
Yes.
And I was shocked to see a big range of some pros that they've got dirty, filthy, grimy drivetrains, 2 days before the race, and I don't think they're doing anything about it. Out of adjustment, and it just goes to show whether you're, beginner or pro or middle of the pack. Some people, that's a high on their priority list, and others they don't really get it.
Right. So, like your body, it's important to keep your bike in good condition. It's going to last you a lot longer. It's going to save you a lot of money. So we're going to talk a little bit about lubing. So let's talk about what you would do on a bike here.
Well, when we get all kinds of bikes in for tune-ups. We get really nice high-end bikes that are well kept, some that are not well kept, and then we get some bikes that have been laying out, in the rain for a decade.
Right.
And sometimes the shifters don't move, the brakes don't move. Everything is just frozen up solid. And the PlanetSafe bike lube is, it's really our secret. And I hate to be doing this interview partly to be giving away, some of those secrets because it just penetrates so well.
Right.
So we take, the best example is on something that's just frozen and been out, literally in the rain, been out in the sun, and nothing moves on it. And when we put the PlanetSafe on and we leave it there for, say, 15, 30 minutes and we come back to it, the brakes are now moving, the shifters are moving, the cables are moving, and it doesn't require a complete overhaul, just a little bit of lube.
Yeah, actually, in San Diego, I was in Coronado in a surf shop, and talking to the owner there, and the young guy that was running his store, he goes, "Oh, that stuff works on bikes," and he goes, "Try it on this." And I go out, and his bike, he had a beach beater, one of those high rides, the high handlebars.
Yeah.
And I swear, everything was rusted, like the wheels, the spokes, the chain was solid rust. I'm like, "How do you ride that?" He goes, "Well, it makes a lot of noise." So I lubed it down. I lubed the chain, just did the chain, wiped it on, and I went back about a week later, and he's like, "Man," he said, the next day on my bike, I was he says, like, riding my bike up the hill to the store, it's like it's giving birth. Like, it makes so much noise. He said, but the next day after putting PlanetSafe on it, quiet.
Yeah.
So you're right, it penetrates. It loves to penetrate rust. So let's talk about the bike.
So when we're doing the chain, first, as part of a tune-up, we totally degrease it first.
Right.
We completely strip it of all the gunk, the previous lubes, the previous grease and grime and stuff that's on there. And then we start out effectively with a pretty clean-looking chain.
Right.
And that's what we have right here, so we're getting ready to apply some lube to it.
Okay, now, one thing I do want to point out about bikes, you have to understand that a lot of these chains, most of these chains are made in China. And
No.
Believe it or
China?
not.
Oh.
Believe it or not. Yeah, they got a little Chinese on there, but it's made in China, and they pack it with it's a really horrible grease. And it's it's really toxic. So when you actually do clean your chain off for the first time, it's actually better to use gloves because that grease is actually quite toxic. So
I swear they put honey on some of them.
It's so sticky and tacky.
Yeah, it's like, this doesn't do anybody any good. It's so sticky. All it does is attract dirt, dust, and grime.
Right.
And who would know that? Average Joe consumer doesn't know that. I hate to say it, but SRAM puts, I swear, honey on their chains when they send them off the production line.
Yeah. So I spoke with a can't think of the bike. Cannondale.
Yeah.
Cannondale Bike Tech. They were driving around Utah, got the big van, the trailer full of bikes, doing bike testing, and he says that the Shimano chains are so toxic, he can't touch them without wearing gloves. So so remember that.
That's another awesome thing about PlanetSafe is it doesn't smell. It's non-toxic. So we use that in the shop, without in confined spaces, without any worries about what it's doing to us, what we're breathing. I'm a chemist by trade, and it is no fun to smell that stuff and live, knowing or not knowing what it's going to do to you long term.
Right.
Other bike lubes, we've have to use outdoors because of the smell.
Right.
We'd have to use them in a well-ventilated area. So as the PlanetSafe, we can use it indoors, no trouble.
Okay. Yeah, women riders love it for that reason, that it has no smell. We get a lot of comments back from women. All right, so on the chain.
Yep. So we usually put it into, let me shift gears.
Okay.
Get it into a, I usually put it in like the big ring and somewhere in the middle on the back. And, the PlanetSafe, see if you guys can see that, has a needle tip applicator. So it goes everywhere you want it and not where you don't. And that's one of my biggest complaints about lubes, that just, it just flows out liberally, but too much so to where it just gets all over everything, and then you got to wipe it off. So I go to the bottom span of the chain and we just run it backwards, and we're just gently squeezing this. And being fairly liberal, I know that we don't need quite that much lube, but I'm going to wipe it off next.
I was going to say, you probably wipe it off.
So it's okay to, I didn't use anything, even a noticeable dent in what we started with, but I think people are sometimes surprised at how much lube we put on, but then we tell them, we take it off, we wipe off the excess. So we're going to let that sort of penetrate the pins and the rollers, which are the integral parts, moving parts of your chain. And then what we're going to wipe off is from the side plates and the tops of the rollers and pins. So what we take off really isn't going to affect what's already penetrated the important parts. Right.
So it crawls right inside the rollers, inside your chain here. And that's why a lot of times too, when people, they do use PlanetSafe, like they buy it in a bike shop or whatever, and they put it on, and it's for sale here too. It is for sale. They put it on the first few times they ride because they haven't cleaned their chain really well, but you also have all that built up, compacted stuff inside the rollers, and that starts to come out. So once that comes out, then you're good to go.
It seems to mobilize some of the other lubes that are now dried and hardened. The worst is when you just have caked on lube, like they just keep adding and adding and adding, and over time it hardens up.
Right.
It just like it'd be like taking an oil that's at room temperature is a liquid, and then cooling it to a certain point and it becoming solid. That's like what the lube comes out as liquid, and then after a while on your bike it's solid.
It becomes a solid.
Yeah,
and
exactly. So after a little bit of time, 10-15 minutes, now we'll just take and rub this backwards. And again, we basically get off as much as we can.
Right.
On the tops and then on the sides. Because there's just no use in having extra lube on the side plates. It doesn't do anybody any good.
Oh, and the other thing too, it's already bonded to the metal. It forms an ionic bond, so all you're taking off is the carrier and the actual...
That's sort of what's left. It's a fairly clean chain to start, but just a little bit comes off.
That's the cleaning action.
Yep. And I also go and take it off the derailleur pulley wheels. Pretty much that's it for
that's
the chain itself. Yeah. And of course, when you're getting it on the bottom span of the chain, that's the part that's going to interact with the chain rings as well as the cogs in the rear cassette.
Right.
So we've covered the drivetrain.
Rather than putting it on top, is applied on the bottom.
Yeah, you apply it to the top, and now we're talking about the external part of the chain that's less likely to interact. So we put it on the bottom span, which is the inside part of the chain.
Okay, that makes sense. I actually never thought of that before. Brilliant.
It's textbooked, I guess. I never learned it there, but.
All right, so that's the chain. Now, the nice thing about this dispenser is this applicator is because of that needle tip, you can get into some other tight spots that should also be lubed.
Yeah, that's I would say the best selling point for us, but it's just how we use the lube. Again, you take something that's just got a blunt tip to it, and it just flows out. You know, when you're dropping it in places, it just gets all over the place, and you'd be lucky to get it in the place you actually want it.
Right.
So we take and we hit all the pivot points. You know, anything that moves. So just really, literally a drop.
One drop.
Maybe 2 drops is all you need, and then we just let it get into place. So there's you got a parallelogram here on the rear derailleur, which means you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points that actually move. And again, all it takes is a drip or 1 drop because it penetrates.
Right. It crawls in there.
Yep. There's a spring, you know, a spring back here, and then I even hit the little jockey wheels back here. I had one guy roll up complaining of a squeaky drivetrain, and he said he had lubed his chain and nothing seemed to be helping. So first thing I did was hit the jockey wheels, and that took care of it.
That was done.
That was it. It was right there between the jockey wheel and where the sealed bearings are.
Right.
And that took care of it. So up to the front derailleur. Again, we've got some moving parts. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think we've got a couple more, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and a little spring in the back. And the spring, I think, is also important to lube, especially on brakes.
Right.
You know, I think on linear pull brakes on things like mountain bikes and cruisers, those little springs tend to be the culprits when you encounter a real sticky, you know, moving brake that just doesn't want to move.
Right.
And again, this is giving away like
another
our secret. But when somebody brings a bike in for a tune-up, I mean, we can basically take something that barely moves and make it, you know, moving again with just a couple drops. So on this type of integrated brake, this is a pretty, you know, high-end aero road bike. It's got aero brakes integrated into the chainstays.
Yeah, I see that.
But there's a spring down here, so we're gonna put right in from the backside. It'll penetrate into that area where it actually pivots and moves.
Right.
And that's where we want it. And then there's cables too. So we're just gonna hit the cables wherever you have an entry or exit point from the housing or from the sleeve. You know, that's a good place to lube it. You can sometimes on a cruiser bike, you can hit the brakes up here.
On the front.
On the front by the handle. Other times you've got maybe a section of cable where the brake, you know, it comes out, it's bare cable exposed, and then it enters again into the housing. And we always put a couple drops in on both ends and let it penetrate. Because it's going to be inside the housing. Let's say you live in the upper Northwest and you got your bike on the back of your car, and it's raining, you're going through wet pavement, and you get rust built up in there. Well, it's inside the housing.
Yeah.
And rather than replace the housing, let's just put a couple of drops in and see what it can do.
Right, so it'll keep it clean inside that housing. It's also good, I keep a rag in a baggie with product on it, with the lube on it, and I wipe down all my cables.
Oh, yeah.
So I got exposed cables on my old triple chain ring track. So it keeps them nice and clean and shiny.
Yeah, so I'd say that's pretty much it
on this one.
Yeah, if I've ever got some, you know, some real sticky, let's say it's an old mountain bike with a seat post bolt that's stuck, and I just can't get it out, and maybe the person's tried and now they've rounded the bolt head off, you know, we put a couple of drops of this, and that usually gets it going. Right.
So, and for reassembly, so pretty much all over the bike.
Yeah, anything that moves.
Anything that moves. Now, what would you say, the first question I get from people is, well, does it attract dust and dirt?
It's really pretty good. We live in some of the dustiest conditions, I think, you know, on the planet. When it starts to get windy, we have such fine dust that, you know, it comes from the rock all over we have. So it's just very, very fine, lightweight,
almost like
dust.
talcum powder.
And it just, when we get any sort of winds, you know, your bike's, if you're riding in it, you know, your car has a film of it on.
Right.
So in terms of what it picks up, like on mountain bikes and stuff, it's really, you know, pretty good.
Right.
You know, I would say the wax products have been the standard for us for off-road application because it's just so dry.
Yeah.
But I don't think its lubrication qualities are, you know, as good as the PlanetSafe. And so it's amazing that it works as you know, as well for off-road as it does for road.
Right. Yeah, I just tell guys, well, if you do a lot of auto pro stuff, just make sure give your bike just a quick wipe
Yeah,
down.
you
After
do
the
have
ride.
to maintain it more often.
Yeah.
You know.
No matter what you're using,
Yeah.
you got to maintain it
Yep.
more often. Okay, Kurt. Well, we really appreciate that.